Welcome to Power Play. Thanks for joining us. I'm Evan Solomon. On the program today, the U.S. pauses Johnson & Johnson doses over blood clot concerns. Will Canada do the same? Check this out.
I expect them to do the same due diligence, connecting to the international regulatory authorities.
Blood clot concerns over the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in the U.S. just come as Public Health here reported Canada's first case of the rare blood clot following an AstraZeneca vaccination. The vaccines share a similar platform. What are the actual dangers, though? Are their risks still very low? We're going to bring you the very latest on the situation from CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver. Then Dr. Isaac Bogosh, an infectious disease specialist, will join us on the press gallery. He's going to give you the facts on this. Then, Air Canada's big bailout. How will it actually work?
They will ensure that regional communities have air connections to the rest of Canada. They will refund their customers for pandemic-related cancellations. They will commit to protect jobs, pensions, and collective agreements. And they will restrict executive compensation, buy back shares, and dividends.
Close to $6 billion in low-interest loans and aid for Air Canada. Where is all the public money actually going? How quickly will you be able to get refunded for a canceled flight? We're going to ask the Transport Minister, Omar Al-Gabra, in a minute. Plus, budget demands. Jagmeet Singh and Annamie Paul meet the Prime Minister. What were their budget red lines? Well, the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, and Annamie Paul, the Green Party leader, did make their face-to-face budget pitches to the PM this afternoon. Are they ready to throw support behind the April 19th budget? What will they want in order to support it? Both of them join us in just a minute, so we can't wait to find out about those meetings. This is Power Play. Let's get to those players. We begin with blood clot concerns that continue to plague some vaccines. Canada reports its very first case of the rare blood clot following an immunization with the AstraZeneca vaccine. This comes as U.S. regulators recommend pausing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine over possible links to rare blood clots there. That prompted the company to hit the pause on its rollout in Europe. Now, the first doses of the 10 million Johnson & Johnson vaccines that are set to come to Canada this month, they'll arrive. So will Canada hit the pause button as well? We begin our coverage with CTV News parliamentary reporter Annie Bergeron-Oliver on this. Annie, what do we know first? Let's start with the AstraZeneca. What do we know about Canada's first case of vaccine-induced blood clotting here?
Well, Evan, we don't know a lot, and that's because health officials have not provided a lot of detail. So all we know so far from public health as well as Quebec authorities is that this was a female patient and she was in Quebec and she received the AstraZeneca vaccine that was made at the Serum Institute in India. So that's it. We don't know the age. We don't know when she received it. But health officials do say that this woman is at home and she's recovering well. Now, interestingly, Evan, we recently talked to a researcher at McMaster University in the Hamilton area who actually talked about how they discovered this. So there's a national surveillance program that I think not very many people know about involving AstraZeneca. So if a patient goes to a doctor, says they recently had AstraZeneca, believe that they may have some type of blood clotting, in some instances, the physician actually will talk to this McMaster research lab that's doing this study, where they will then analyze the samples and they can actually test to see if an individual has the specific antibody and platelet that can cause the clotting. So it was actually a sample that was sent to McMaster University that tested positive that discovered that this woman did indeed have a clot that was associated with AstraZeneca. They said this happened about a week ago. They received their first sample. They've so far tested 10 samples, and only one, this individual from Quebec, tested positive.
Okay, now there are similar concerns in the United States now with Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, I just want to tell people, it's a similar platform to AstraZeneca. They're both called viral vector technology vaccines. What happened there?
Right. So U.S. officials came out today saying there were 6 instances of blood clots after a Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, it's important to remember that there have been 6.8 million doses administered in the U.S. So 6 cases out of 6.8 million doses administered. So the risk is very, very low. But Dr. Fauci and other health officials were saying today they want to make sure that Americans feel safe behind this vaccine, and they want to ensure that this is investigated very early. One of these cases was fatal. In another case, the individual is currently in critical care. Now, what officials are saying in the U.S., Evan, is that this means that the system worked as it should, that these cases, the 6 of them, were caught early, that this, because of the regiments that are there, the safety precautions, the surveillance, these 6 cases were caught very early. And the officials are saying this is why Americans should not be hesitant about getting the vaccine. In fact, that they should be confident that there are systems in place to catch any type of adverse effect very early. And again, only 6 cases out of 6.8 million doses administered. So doctors are saying the risk is very, very low associated with the Johnson & Johnson. That connection has not been confirmed, and they say your risk of a blood clot from any of these vaccines is significantly lower than the risk of getting a blood clot if you get COVID-19.
Yeah, and Annie, just very quickly, so has Health Canada said anything about, we know we're going to get some Johnson & Johnson vaccines, if Canada's going to follow suit?
So far, no Johnson & Johnson vaccines have been administered, as you point out. We're supposed to get our first doses sometime by the end of this month. We've ordered 10 million. Health Canada says that right now, obviously, they don't have any evidence here in Canada because no doses have been administered. But they said they're going to be looking at that U.S. data. They're going to be analyzing what's happening in the U.S. and around the world very closely and working with their partners. So they say they're aware of it, they're looking into it, and they'll make sure that this vaccine has any type of precautions necessary. And they're going to analyze that data to make sure that when it does come into Canada, it is safe and it is effective for Canadians.
All right, Annie Bergeron Oliver with the latest on that. Thanks, Annie. Great to have you.
Thanks, Evan.
Okay, let's switch now to the big bailout. It's finally landed. The Air Canada aid package, what does it actually look like, though? Well, it's a $5.9 billion agreement, one that crucially also finally refunds customers impacted by the coronavirus who lost their flights, one that protects workers as well. Let me show you a closer, detailed look at the package. As I said, $5.8 billion package. $4 billion worth of low-interest loans make up the bulk of the package. The federal government will purchase $500 million worth of Air Canada shares, about 6% of the company. One of the most talked about features, of course, is the loan money earmarked for refunds. $1.4 billion has been set aside for that. Air Canada says it will offer refunds for COVID-19 related cancellations dating back to February 2020, starting today. There are other details: executive salary caps, restoring 17 regional routes, and lots more. So how did this deal finally come together? And when will the government and another big airline, WestJet, strike their own deal, if they will? Let's find out. Joining me now is the Transport Minister, Omar Al-Gabra. Minister, good to have you on the program. I know tonight Ramadan begins, so Ramadan Mubarak, happy Ramadan, and hope it's a good month ahead.
Thank you very much, Evan. It's good to be on your show, and happy Ramadan to you and all of your viewers who observe it. Absolutely.
Minister, after many months of trying to negotiate some deal with Air Canada, what finally closed the deal? Was it the fact that the third wave of COVID has brought on new restrictions? Did that sort of push this over the finish line?
Evan, let me just say that this deal was necessary to protect jobs, to refund passengers, to reconnect communities, and to protect air travel advisors or agents. It took a while, I agree, because it was very complicated. There are many dimensions. There's large sums of money. So I wish, I would have liked to have it sooner, but there was a reason why it took this long. We wanted to make sure that we had the right deal for Canadians and also for Air Canada and Air Canada workers.
Okay, let me parse it out. $5.9 billion, $5.4 billion, almost $5.5 are low-interest loans. How long does Air Canada have to repay these low-interest loans?
So they are in tranches, but up to 7 years, I think. They have up till 7 years to pay back their loans. So they don't have to utilize the entire funds. There are different tranches, as I said. They're structured that way to allow some flexibility.
Right. Is there a penalty if they don't pay on time?
There are fees that are subject. The terms or the contract or the agreement is subject to certain fees. So there are some, of course, conditions.
The markets didn't particularly love this. Markets viewed this as an equity dilution piece because they thought this was, and I'm now talking about the $500 million to take about 6% of the company. Some markets regarded this as a discount stake in the company. How does your government respond to the idea that you've technically lowered the value of Air Canada by taking this equity portion?
I think the fact that the government of Canada is offering support to Air Canada should send a strong signal to Canadians, but also to financial markets, that we have confidence in the market, in the aviation sector, in Air Canada workers. So this should send a strong signal, and that we are providing liquidity at a difficult time for the airline to make sure that they continue to provide services, to protect jobs, and to be there as we get over COVID.
There's another. So let's go over other aspects. One of the aspects is the CEO and executive compensation is capped at $1 million a year. That would include stock options. By the way, that's an astronomical number, I understand, but I just want to appreciate normally the CEO of Air Canada gets about $13 million a year. How long is the cap on this salary in place? I understand it's until the loans are repaid. You think they're going to pay their CEO, who normally gets $13 million, $1 million for up to 7 years?
Evan, these are the terms of the agreement. We wanted to make sure that we were very prudent with taxpayers' money. We did the right thing that was for Canadians. So those are the terms of the agreement. I understand that Air Canada is now subjected to these conditions. So, you're asking me to predict what the future is going to hold. I can't, but I can tell you those are the terms of the agreements.
Okay, and on the equity portion, why only 6%? I mean, of the $5.9 billion, I know there's most of it's the low interest loans. Why only take 6% of the company? If you believe in Air Canada, if there's an upside to this industry, why not take more equity and let the Canadian taxpayer and the citizen ride the upside, not just the downside?
Evan, our main priority is to protect jobs, as I said, to restore routes, to refund passengers. So the equity is just an upside out of the package that we structured with Air Canada. We don't have interest in owning Air Canada. We want a competitive marketplace for passengers, for Canadians. Our interest is not in owning Air Canada. In fact, we want to make sure that we have a competitive marketplace that serves Canadians now and into the future.
Many Canadians, probably most Canadians, have their eye on the consumer refund part, which also was contingent on this, and critical part. And it stipulates that Air Canada must issue refunds for passengers who book flights but did not travel since February 2020. I guess the refunds are available, as I understand it, as early as April 13th. How do people get that money?
So Air Canada is going to roll out, I think they started actually today rolling out how passengers can access those refunds. And it's going to depend on how they purchased those tickets. Did they purchase it directly online? Did they purchase them through a travel agent? Did they purchase them through other forms or other third parties? So it's going to depend, and Air Canada is rolling that out. I think they announced that today.
Yeah. And my dates got screwed up. April 13th is today. There you go. Your government's also now in conversation with WestJet. I know WestJet, like Air Canada, had used the wage subsidy for their workers. They put out a press release saying, that's what we've done. Is there a deal in the offing with WestJet that would be similar? Low interest loans, possible equity stake?
Evan, I'm not able to prejudge the outcome of that deal, or if there's a deal. We are in discussions, as the Deputy Prime Minister said yesterday. We are in discussions with WestJet. Certainly, we want to respect the same principles: the refund, the reconnecting regional routes, ensuring that jobs are protected and travel agents are protected. So the same principles apply. Also, it's important important to mention, those are not grants, those are loans. So we're maintaining the same principles, but as far as the little details of the agreement, it's being negotiated, so we'll see what happens.
Just two last questions on this. When will Air Canada resume those regional routes, the 17 routes that were also part of this deal?
We agreed that no later than June 1st.
June 1st for people. Before I let you go, the other big issue is the U.S.-Canada border. It's closed again, and I appreciate that. You know, the Chamber of Commerce had issued a statement today. They're very concerned about how long it's been closed, that the key to Canada's economic recovery will be trade. Is your government working on some kind of metric as to when that, with the United States, as to when that border will open? What is the threshold in terms of COVID cases on both sides of the border?
You know, Evan, I may have said this to you before. COVID, when it arrived, it did not arrive with an instruction manual. And our government was really and continues to be focused on protecting the health and safety of Canadians. And we continue to have to make difficult but necessary decisions. And one of those decisions is the border closure with the United States in agreement and coordination with our friends in the United States. I could tell you that we are in discussions. I've met twice virtually with my counterpart, Secretary Buttigieg, and both times we talked about coordinating the reopening of the borders, the reopening and restarting of the aviation sector. So we are having these conversations with the United States.
Okay, but and I know you've met with the Transport Secretary there, Buttigieg, as just said, but just real quick, the health and safety is also economically related. Will there be a threshold when you get the R rate or some kind of COVID metric that say, okay, we'll have a step process just to give some businesses some kind of reassurance right now?
Yeah, there will be threshold, but it's not just one factor, Evan. It's going to be multiple factors. It's the transmission rate, it's the number of infections at hospitals and vaccination rollout. There's going to be multiple factors, but yes, there are going to be thresholds. All
right, Minister Alghabra, great to have you on the program, sir. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Evan.
Coming up next, budget battles. Jagmeet Singh and Enemy Paul both met with the Prime Minister today to push for their changes to the April 19th budget. What do they want to see? What do they need to see in order to support the budget? We're going to ask both Mr. Singh and Ms. Paul next what happened at their big meeting. Stay with us.
I know people are eager to find out what's in the budget, but they're going to have to wait until next Monday for us to put forward an ambitious budget for this country that is going to be focused on jobs and growth and building back better, even as we get through these hopefully final stages of the pandemic.
All right, well, do they know what's in the budget, or are these last-minute budget battles actually consequential? Look, these are battles that could decide whether or not this government falls and a federal election is called. Because this is Canada's first budget in over 2 years. It's just 6 days away. And today, the leaders of the NDP and the Green Party met with the Prime Minister to make their demands on what they need to see in order to support it. But if the budget's already written, are these just pantomimes? Well, the Prime Minister has already met with the Conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole. I wouldn't expect his support for the budget. The Bloc leader also met with them, saying he wants support for seniors and, of course, no strings attached to funding for the provinces. No surprise there. So today began with the man whose party support is probably critical for the federal government, the NDP. Is Mr. Singh satisfied with his meeting with the Prime Minister? Enough that he might support the budget? Let's find out. Joining us now is NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Good to have you back on the program. Sir, you had your pre-budget consultation with the Prime Minister earlier today. What demands did you make?
Two key things I said have to happen. We need to see better access to a better paid sick leave program. A lot of workers are still going into work sick. Workplace transmission is still one of the highest and most dangerous sources of transmission. This is a vital way to keep people safe. And I also said to the Prime Minister, we need to get better at delivering the vaccine. In particularly hard-hit communities, poor communities, have higher rates of infection and lower rates of vaccination. So we've got to get the vaccine to those who need it most. And I push for a more proactive role in making that happen.
And how did he respond? Did he say, oh, my goodness, those are fantastic suggestions. We're going to put those in the budget immediately. Jagmeet Singh, thank you so much. Or did he say, we're listening. doesn't matter, the budget's already written, see you later, here's the door?
Well, neither of those. He said he took my suggestions and listened to them and said he would get back to me and see what their team could do. But I'm going to be really adamant that we need to make sure paid sick leave is better. We need to get better at getting people vaccinated. We're in a third wave. People are worried. They're afraid. And they're also really frustrated right now. And I was really trying to channel that frustration that people are feeling, that they need some help now. They need to see a better vaccination rollout, and they need to see paid sick leave. These are things that people are calling for, and I wanted to channel what people are telling me they think they need.
Mr. Singh, I know you're going to be adamant, but you've already told me numerous times, and you've said it multiple places, you just do not want to vote against this budget for fear that would bring down the government and cause an election in the pandemic. So how adamant can you be if he already knows no matter what's in it, you're going to support it?
Well, two things. First off, the real person in this story are people, the people that want paid sick leave, Canadians that want to see the vaccine actually work and people get vaccinated. That's who I'm channeling. And if the Prime Minister, if Justin Trudeau doesn't do what's necessary, he's not letting down me, he's letting down these Canadians, people who are saying we need this help. And secondly, I want to be very clear, in a third wave, with variants rampaging across Canada, with the highest record number of cases in Ontario, field hospitals being set up in Ontario, the ICU being overrun, Quebec with high numbers everywhere in Canada, it would be irresponsible and not right for a leader to plunge this country into an election. So I am choosing not to do what would be irresponsible to do, and I'm very firm on that.
Okay. It does weaken your political hand, and I appreciate that. But I just quickly want your comment. The Prime Minister talked about the role that opposition parties are playing, like yours. I know, you've taken credit for a lot of things. The Prime Minister kind of pushing back, saying, success has lots of parents, but we're actually the parent. Here's what he said.
It is the role of political parties to try and make themselves look as good as they can and as relevant as they can. It is the role of a government to be there to support Canadians.
So he basically said, look, you guys are taking credit for all this stuff. We did it. And I understand there's going to be jockeying for position. What is your response to that if you support this budget and then you say, look, we did it all? Why would Canadians say you did it if it's Mr. Trudeau's budget? Doesn't he get the credit for it?
Well, let's be really clear. We know the track record. We've got the evidence. The Liberals introduced wage subsidy at 10%. That means they were going to cover 10% of a person's salary. We fought. We did joint letters. We brought together business, labor leaders, and specifically said it should be at least 75%, and we got it to 75%. It's clear. The Liberals introduced it at 10. We brought it up to 75. The CERB was introduced at 1,000 and very limited access. We broadened that access so that people who needed help got it. We did that. We've got the evidence on it. Paid sick leave was never on the government's horizon. They had no plan to do it. We fought for it and brought it in. And you also were one of the journalists that noted that was our requirement for support, and we got that done. We got help to students. It was not on the agenda. Direct financial support was not on the Liberal agenda. We fought for it. It was a condition that we required for support. So we can show that we got the results. The Liberals might be interested in taking credit for the work we did, but at the end of the day, we got the results. We have the evidence that they started at a certain amount and we fought and got the help that people needed. And really, I'm more interested in Canadians getting the help and Canadians knowing that when they need someone in their corner, they can count on me. I will be there for them.
Okay. Interesting meeting. I know you're going to support the budget, but then, of course, we'll find out where that goes in terms of any kind of federal election. Mr. Singh, always good to have you drop by. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, that is Jagmeet Singh. And by the way, what you're hearing, and you heard it with Mr. Singh, these are what will be the campaign lines. We did this. We took credit for the paid sick leave. We took credit for support for students. That's us. If you want more of that, vote for us. That's going to be the NDP pitch. The Liberals are going to say, no, they talk, we act. That's the Liberal pitch. The Conservatives, they will also have their pitch that they got this wrong and that there's big deficits. Well, what about the Green Party? Well, Green Party leader Annamie Paul also met with Justin Trudeau today, the Prime Minister. What did she do in that meeting? What demands did she make? And it's good news. We have the Green Party leader Annamie Paul here as well. Ms. Paul, always a pleasure to have you on the program. What do you need to see in this budget for this budget to get the 3 seats in the Green Party to support?
In this third wave, first, nice to see you again, Evan. In this third wave, which we're in the grips of, we have the urgent needs and then the longer term things. In terms of the urgent needs, we all political parties promised to be there for people in Canada and to fill holes in supports when we saw them. So I mentioned to the Prime Minister that one of the big gaping holes right now is the need for a national residential tenant support for the thousands of people across Canada who are falling further and further into arrears and that risk being evicted as soon as the moratoriums are lifted in different parts of the country. That's a benefit that would be like the emergency rent subsidy that's provided to commercial businesses. It's something the federal government has offered to businesses, and rightly so, and that they should be offering as a benefit to tenants. The other one was the reinstatement of the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, because students are right back where they started last summer. The jobs aren't there. They're further in debt. The jobs are not going to be there at the beginning of May when they need them, and so that benefit should be reinstated. And of course, more cooperation. I'm really disheartened to see this descent into hyper-partisanship and election posturing at a time when we know we can get the most out of this parliament if we work together.
Yeah, I mean, minority governments don't last usually about 2 years. I mean, this is a partisan time for sure. How did the Prime Minister respond? Did he give any signals that he's amenable to any of your suggestions?
Well, here's the difference. You know, this was, I appreciate the Prime Minister's invitation, and I mentioned what I discussed because he made it public that he was doing this meeting, but I'm not going to speak for him. I want to give him the respect of some time to soak in what we discussed. We also talked, of course, about the need to increase our climate target and to announce that at the summit next week that President Biden is hosting, creating a carbon border adjustment. And so I want to believe that these are things that now that they've been brought to his attention, he's willing to do. And I'm going to give him a little bit of more time than half an hour to decide.
Is there a green line? I mean, usually it's a red line. For you, it would be a green line. Is there a green line? If I don't see this in the budget, I can't vote for it.
Well, I haven't spoken with our caucus since my conversation with the Prime Minister, but we didn't vote in support of the speech from the throne because there wasn't any concrete plan for long-term care and that humanitarian crisis, because we hadn't increased our targets. And also because there was no mention of guaranteed livable income either. So I'm not at all saying that we have settled on that, because we'll be speaking tomorrow. But for us, we do not want an election, and we absolutely want this parliament to work. But we're not, I'm certainly in no position to hand over a blank check either.
Before I let you go, I just want to talk about Laurentian University, the Francophone University in Sudbury, Ontario. It cut over 100 faculty positions today. They've been filing for creditor protection earlier this year, so they're in a very precarious situation. And did you talk about that with the Prime Minister? Does a university like that need, I mean, again, provincial responsibility, does it need any federal support?
We didn't speak specifically about Laurentian. It was a fairly short meeting, but I think that that's a great example of a more general theme, which is that yes, it's a minority parliament, but Evan, you know, as someone who follows Canadian politics and you're a political historian, that minority parliaments can do extraordinary things. The risk that our Francophone universities our post-secondary institutions are at the moment isn't necessary. Our lack of movement on things like a guaranteed livable income, universal pharmacare, these are things that minority parliaments do best, actually. And so Laurentian is an example of that. I think that if we get together in the spirit of how can we protect these critical Francophone institutions, we can do a lot. And so that's one thing that I said to the Prime Minister. How can we use this historic moment and this minority parliament to actually get some of these things done? Can we stop pretending that we don't agree on anything just because there may be an election, and see what things we do agree on so we can make them happen for people in Canada? That is something that excites me.
Well, we got a Canadian flag in a minority parliament. Annamie Paul, Green Party leader, always good to have you on the program. We'll wait to see what the Green Party does and what you do on April 19th. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to just get to some other news that you need to know right now, folks. Yesterday's Yukon territorial election is still too close to call. Right now, it's a tie between the two main parties, suggesting the territory is heading towards a minority government. The Liberals and the Yukon Party each won 8 seats. The NDP took 2. One riding is headed to a judicial recount Thursday after Liberals and New Democrats both had 78 votes. Can you imagine? Talk about every vote counting. 78 votes. The Liberals came into the election hoping to build on their surprise 2016 majority win, but the results suggest the NDP could hold the balance of power. If that doesn't make you want to get out to vote, nothing will. The reopening of the Atlantic bubble has been delayed by at least 2 weeks. Now it's May 3rd. The decision was made by the 4 Atlantic premiers, given the recent uptick in COVID-19 cases. Once reopened, residents will be allowed to travel freely between the Atlantic provinces without any quarantine. Boy, that region has done this really well. And the patriarch of the Weston Empire and the former chairman of George Weston Limited has died at the age of 80. W. Galen Weston died peacefully at home Monday after a long illness, according to a news release from his family. Mr. Weston was born into that retail empire, but he helped build. He really was the architect of an international food, retail, and real estate company empire, including Loblaw and the Selfridges Group. He retired as chairman of George Weston Limited in 2016. He was 80 years old. Coming up, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was dealt a blow before Canada even gets a chance to administer any doses. Will this throw off Canada's vaccine timeline? Dr. Isaac Bogosh joins the press gallery next with some facts. Stay with us. Welcome back to Power Play. Let's do our daily check-in with the latest COVID numbers in Alberta. Here's Dr. Hinshaw with the latest as they battle the variants of concern.
Over the last 24 hours, we have identified 1,081 new cases of COVID-19 and completed about 12,000 tests. Our positivity rate currently stands at 8.9%. We have identified 705 additional cases of variants of concern in the last 24 hours. Variants currently represent about 52% of our active cases. There are now active alerts or outbreaks in 453 schools, which represents 19% of all schools in the province. A total of 2,653 cases have been linked to these schools since January 11th. We are seeing a sharp rise in cases in school-aged Albertans as well as those in all other age groups. While there are no risk-free options with COVID-19, the rise we have seen is not attributed to any single cause, and in fact is often linked to social gatherings outside school rather than transmission within classrooms. This reinforces the importance of following the measures in place, not only during school hours, but before and after them as well. There are now 402 people in hospital being treated for COVID-19, including 88 in the ICU. Hospitalizations are increasing province-wide, and cases continue to rise sharply. My team is monitoring closely, and if we do not see growth slowing soon, further measures may be required. Sadly, I must announce that 3 new deaths were reported to Alberta Health in the last 24 hours. My condolences go to the family, friends, and loved ones of these individuals who are mourning their loss, and to anyone who is grieving a loss at this time. I am pleased to report that we have now administered more than 900,000 doses of the vaccine in Alberta. I want to encourage anyone who is eligible, all 1.7 million Albertans, to book your appointment as soon as possible. There may be some questions about who can book appointments right now, so I want to be clear that anyone 16 or older who has a medical condition like diabetes, COPD, severe asthma, heart disease, or any other conditions on the list available at alberta.ca is now eligible. In addition, this week we have opened eligibility for all those who work in healthcare settings as part of the in-person care teams providing care in community clinics, acute care settings, and other healthcare locations. Please check the website at alberta.ca to find out more about who is currently eligible and how employers can provide letters to their employees to verify their role at the workplace. If you have already been immunized, thank you for making the choice.
All right, so that is Dr. Hinshaw talking about the cases in Alberta. Interestingly, Alberta, like Quebec and Ontario, are identifying schools as a vector, whereas in BC, they're saying they're not, which is one of those confusing to Canadians moments. Meantime, speaking of confusion, another vaccine approved by Canada is getting some troubling headlines worldwide. The single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been put on pause in the U.S. and Europe and South Africa over potential links to a rare blood clot. But here's the numbers. 6 out of the 6.8 million Johnson & Johnson doses administered in the U.S. saw cases of this blood clotting with 1 death. Canada is expected to get its first shipment of the 10 million we've ordered by the end of the month. So none have been administered here. But Canada did report today its first case of vaccine-induced blood clotting. That relates to the AstraZeneca vaccine, similar platform to Johnson & Johnson. So will Canada overhaul the vaccine strategy? Press Gallery is here to talk about all that. Bob Fife, the Globe and Mail's Ottawa bureau chief, is here. Emily Nicolas, the columnist for Le Devoir and the Gazette's here. And our special guest is Dr. Isaac Bogosh, member of Ontario's COVID-19 Vaccine Distribution Task Force. Welcome to everybody. Doc, can you spit some facts at us on dangers of blood clotting with AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, and maybe how we sort of connect the risk-reward here?
Sure, absolutely. So, for example, AstraZeneca vaccine, we know that there are these very rare, but possibly severe blood clots that are associated with the vaccine. It's not fair to say what the true incidence of these are because we don't quite know what it is, but it's still fair to say that it's very, very rare, predominantly but not exclusively in women, predominantly but not exclusively in younger individuals. And, it was sadly a matter of time before we were going to see that in Canada as we administer more and more of this vaccine. Real, but rare. Same with, it looks like Johnson & Johnson. It's a very similar vaccine platform, not identical, but similar vaccine platform. And it looks like, and we still obviously don't have all the information at our fingertips, it looks like this may be also a real but very rare event. I think we have to factor in lots of things. What is the state of COVID-19 in our country? What is the state of vaccine availability in our country? What is the true incidence of these risks? Do we give people the option to make an informed decision whether they're willing to risk this or not? Or do we just say, you know what, these people can get it and below this you can't and above this age group you can? I think we have a lot of big decisions to make in the country right now.
Yeah, Bob Fife, there are lots of questions about vaccine hesitancy, vaccine confusion on all sorts of levels. What do you make of this news and what it may do to Canada's race against the variants to vaccinate as many Canadians as possible?
Well, Evan, I'm really afraid that it's going to make a lot of people very leery of wanting to have the Johnson & Johnson vaccine or the AstraZeneca one. This is coming at a time when the variants are spreading like wildfire, or hospitals are becoming full with COVID patients. And, for example, Toronto is shipping COVID patients to Ottawa because their hospitals are so full. But I don't think there's much doubt that a lot of people will be very concerned about having that. And that's I don't know what the government is going to do or what healthcare professionals are going to do to try to get a message out there to the Canadians that it's very, very rare and you should take it no matter. You should take these vaccines to protect yourselves from the new variants, which are very, very dangerous.
Yeah, Emily, how's this playing out in Quebec? Again, everyone's told whatever vaccine you get first, take it, if it's AstraZeneca. Now, again, Johnson & Johnson hasn't arrived here, but does this kind of increase this sense of not only confusion, but potential hesitancy?
I think it does. In Quebec, there's clinics that are open without any appointment to people who are over the age of 55 already. So those people can access the walk-in clinics. What we know and observe is that there could be actually more people going to those clinics. There was a rush in the first couple of days, but there's also some reason why there could be more people coming in than there are right now. One of the things, though, is that there's really more, I guess, I don't want to say fear mongering, but people saying that the risks are more than people, that there are people saying what the risks are compared to the risk of catching COVID-19. What we know is that there's a lot more risk of blood clots with getting COVID than there is with the vaccine. There's a lot of young women as well who are taking the birth control pills, and none of those birth control pills are getting recalled, although there's far more risk with getting blood clots with the birth control pill than with the vaccine. And so I'm not sure that everybody's doing the best of jobs at making that information available. If you want people to make informed decisions, they need to also have that kind of information as well.
Yeah, you make a great point, and one we've raised. There's lots of other drugs that have this, and Dr. Bogosh, you can weigh in on those that risk sense. But would you mind weighing in? Just because we heard Alberta say, schools can be a vector here. In BC, they're saying, they really aren't. It's really important to keep kids in school. Like the question of schools, which is so fundamental, and what's spreading this seems so confusing. And again, the theme keeps being, confidence and confusion. What's your view on if schools are a vector or not?
Okay, so I think it's pretty clear that if you put a bunch of people together in an indoor environment and, at times you have them take off their masks and you can't guarantee physical distancing and you have inconsistent ventilation, it should come to no one's surprise that you're going to get transmission. That's just how this virus is transmitted. Having said that, I don't think it's fair to talk about schools as one unit. We know that there are some schools that are in communities with lower rates of transmission. There are some schools that have better ability to practice physical distancing and improve the ventilation in the classroom. There's just a lot of other factors that go into this. And I think even in a particular province, there's probably some regions where schools are much safer than others. And even within a region, there's probably some schools that are safer than others based on factors and resources available to that particular school. So can schools transmit? Of course they can. Has there been transmission in schools? Of course there are. But in general, I think we should look at this in a much more regional approach. In Ontario, for example, you had Dr. Lawrence Lowe say he was concerned about transmissions in the schools in Peel, which of course is a very high burden area. And I'm sure there were some schools that were amplifying the virus there. But I think if you went to other parts of the province, the schools would be actually rather safe. So it's probably a very regional approach here.
Yeah, regional approach. Okay, Dr. Isaac Bogosh, thanks for your work. I really appreciate you joining us to get some facts on the table on that. Emily and Bob are staying with us because I want to move to this massive aid package for Air Canada. The government has announced an almost $6 billion aid package for Air Canada. This is a week before the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, is set to table the budget. Is it a good deal? Does the timing say anything about a potential federal election? Wink, wink, nod, nod. Are more bailouts coming? So Bob and Emily are here. We'll now bring in Lisa Raitt, who is, of course, a former transport minister. Great to have you here. And I'll start with you, Lisa. Good to have you on the program. What do you make of the Air Canada deal?
It had to happen. There's a good reason for it, too. No government of any stripe wants to be the government on watch in a possible Air Canada bankruptcy where pensioners, 36,000 of them, I think, maybe, all end up not having their pensions fulfilled. So from a political point of view, this deal was going to happen. I don't know a lot of the details. I'm just reading it as it all comes in. But it seems to be hitting all of the things that the government set out that they wanted to accomplish, refunding the passengers, making sure that the regional routes started up again, and ensuring that they kept a minimum amount of people working there and setting the floor for that number of employees. So that's the good part, but we'll have to see. Just remember one thing, Evan. A repayable loan is only repayable if the government of the day decides that they're not going to forgive it. And we saw both in the case of GM and Chrysler that billions of dollars were written off.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did ask Omar Al-Gabr, that the transport minister, and he said, no, there's fee penalties if they decide not to pay. But so I did ask about that. It's over 7 years. Bob, good deal. What's your take on the Air Canada deal?
Well, I mean, the government held to its conditions they laid out November 8th to make sure that there were going to be refunds, that there were not going to be job losses, and that they were going to continue to keep regional routes, as well as making sure that new aircraft are produced at the Montreal Airbus plant. But you have to understand there are going to be it's going to be difficult for Air Canada to make independent business decisions when the federal government has a 20% ownership in Air Canada. It's going to be difficult for them not to think of the political considerations when they do that. For example, how would that might compete with low cost airlines? They may not be able to do so. So you'll see more Canadians when the pandemic is over going to the United States to take these low cost flights. What does it mean for air transit? Does that mean that the Quebec government and the federal government are going to have to pony up some money and have an equity stake in Air Transit or Porter Airlines? So there's a lot of questions to be answered here yet, and it's not a cut and dried situation as far as I can see it.
Yeah, hard to turn off the tap. Emily, there are lots of jobs, as Bob just mentioned, in Montreal, just on that Air Transat deal. They were about to get taken over by WestJet. That got turned down. Their stock plummeted. What do you make of this?
I think it's a good news that the deal is finally struck. There's a lot of jobs that have been lost already. I think it's important to remember. I think almost 2/3 of the jobs at Air Canada have already been cut. However, this means that the jobs that remain will remain and that the customers will get reimbursed. And because that touches a lot of Canadians, politically speaking, this is a good news as well. The other thing that's going to be interesting to follow as well is what other deals the government of Canada might strike with other companies such as WestJet, for example, that you just mentioned, that it still doesn't have any deal. Because it looks like even if we do get vaccinated as Canadians, as long as basically the planet is not vaccinated, it's still going to be a really hard time for the tourism industry and for transportation. So it's not like it's going to be over in June and things are going to be back to normal for them. It might be for the majority of Canadians if you are in other sectors of business, but this is definitely not for airlines.
By the way, it was Air Canada that was going to buy Air Transat, not WestJet.
Yeah.
WestJet may get a deal.
Yes.
And I'll go to Lisa Ray real quick. Lisa, do you expect to see a deal with, the WestJets or other airlines?
Well, they all seem to be negotiating. We have to take the minister at his and her words as they talk about that. But everybody got hit equally in this. And I think it was mentioned earlier today, too, the smaller regional airports certainly have been hit hard. I think the air sector in general is waiting to see what kind of a bailout they're all going to have to get. And the government's going to have to play a big role in all of them. I'm a little surprised to see the equity piece that was taken, but it does make sense that if you've learned anything from the last time that we did a bailout, you definitely want to have an equity piece. You definitely want to have more than just a debt sitting on the books of Canada to ensure that you get some repayment.
Yeah, I'm not surprised they took that either. I was surprised actually it was such a small part of it, but I don't think they're interested, according to Omar Alghabra, that they don't want to own it. Bob, I got 2 minutes here for you and Emily on the political timing of this. Anything tell you? Well, look, I don't think that this was these negotiations have been going on for months. I think they just made the deal because that's what they were able to make it over the weekend with Michael Sabia, the Deputy Minister of Finance, who's, as you know, a very experienced business executive. So I don't think this thing was timed politically. I think it was just the way the negotiations went. Emily, last word to you. Michael Sabia, of course, the Deputy Minister of Finance. You know him in Quebec as the former head of the Caisse.
Yes, and I agree with Bob. I think it's just they struck the deal the way that they struck the deal. If it had been earlier, it would have been good because people have been waiting for their refunds. And if it had been later, we would have said, oh, is it because the election is coming very, very soon? And so regardless of the timing, there would have been something to say about it. Well, any time before an election when they're doing this, I'm sure they like it. It's fortuitous anyway. Lisa, Bob, and Emily, great to have the three of you on the program. As always, I really appreciate your analysis on that. And thank all of you for engaging in politics and watching the program. We will be back here in 23 short hours. Hug your loved ones if it's safe. And for those celebrating Ramadan Mubarak, happy Ramadan to all of those observing. I know we wish you all an easy fast during the day. And we will be back here in 23 short hours. Take care.